today we're going to learn two different things. I put the lessons together because it is easy. So we're going to talk about square roots, which is super easy because the calculator is going to do it for you. And then we're going to talk about categorizing numbers and putting them in order from least to greatest or greatest to least. Okay? So what is a square root? What does it mean? So let me tell you where it came from. Everybody knows what a square is, yes? All sides are the same. Okay, are y'all with me? So to find the area of a square, what do you do? You're close. Side times? Okay, so side, y'all don't have to write this if you don't want to. Times side will give you area. Are y'all with me? Isn't that side squared gives you the area? Yes? So if I gave you the area, like say the area was 100, how would you get the side length? You can't divide it. You don't know it. You would square root it. That's where the word comes from. Square root is based off of squares. To get the side length, I would have to square root 100 because that means what number times itself is 100, yes? So what would the side lengths be here? 10. So a square root means what number times itself will give you that answer. And it's based off of squares because squares have all sides that are the same. You cannot find a side length from an area by dividing a square because all sides are the same. You don't know what to divide by. That's the square root. Are y'all with me? Now, one thing you do need to understand is the square root of 100 has two answers. What number times itself is 100? Does everybody agree 10 times 10 is 100? But there's another answer. Who knows it? What? There's another number times itself that will give you 100. 100 times 100 is not 100. What is it? Are y'all ready? Negative 10 times negative 10 is also positive, but your calculator is only going to give you the positive answer. Okay? You need to understand that the square root of a number has two answers. Now, if I was asking this question, would you tell me negative 10? No, because a measurement can't be negative. So you would obviously say positive 10. Okay? Now, on these, to find the square roots, if it doesn't specify, if it just asks for the square root of 49, then you're fine just putting 7. But you need to understand that 7 times 7 is 49, and negative 7 times negative 7 is also 49. Now, for those of you who don't know your square roots, the square root button is right here. Do y'all see it in blue? Yes? So how would I access that? Second square root, and then you, of course, would put in 49, and it's going to give you 7. Everybody good? Now, if it does this, that means it wants both answers. So you can't put that in your calculator. You just know the square root of 36 is. So it's saying it can be positive or negative 6. Because 6 times 6 is 36, and negative 6 times negative 6 is also 36. Easy? All right, what's the square root of 100? And since it's specifying, they want both answers, plus and minus 10. Good? Okay. What is it specifying here? What answer does it want? It only wants the negative answer. So the square root of 4 is 2, because 2 times 2 is 4. But it only wants the negative answer, so negative 2. All right, what's the square root of 121? 11, and it only wants the negative, so negative 11. And the last one, the square root of 400, well, 20 times 20 is 400, and it wants both versions of the answer, so plus and minus 20. Those are called perfect square roots. They're perfect because they give you a whole number or an integer. Okay, we're going to go into non-perfect square roots in a minute, and we're going to talk about them. But first, let's do that example like I just showed y'all. It says approximate the side lengths of this square pasture that has an area of 945. So if the area is 945, what would the side lengths be? What do I do to that number? Square root it. So I square root 945, Do I care about the negative answer? I don't. I do not care about the negative answer because this is a side length and you can't have a negative length, okay? So the square root of 945. Now, did it tell you how to round? It did not tell me how to round. So let's round to the tenths place. So the side length would be what? 30.7 what? Yards. Would I put square yards? No. Square yards means area. Y'all know how with area you write like yards squared or inches squared? For a side length you would never write that. Okay, so just yards. All right, now this is part of your assignment, so make sure you're paying attention. It says approximate to the nearest integer. Y'all know what an integer is, right? A positive or negative counting number. So 1, -1, 2, -2. They want you to round to the nearest integer. All right, so everybody put in the square root of 32. What is that closest to, 5 or 6? 6. Okay, the square root of 103. What is that closest to? 10. The square root of 130. 11. Remember, 5 or more, raise the score. 4 or less, let it rest. What are all these answers going to be? Negatives. All right, you don't have to put the negative in unless you just want to. The square root of 48 is 6.9, so it's closest to. But I must put the negative, so -7. If you want to put the negative sign in because it makes you feel better, you can. All right, is that closest to -18 or -19? And the negative square root of 70 is closest to -8. Don't say +8. Easy? All right, the next part's super easy as well. It says write the number as a power. A power is an exponent. They're not wanting you to change the value. So you're looking at, you basically square root it, but you're looking at what number times itself is 16? 4. So 4 squared is the same as 16. Did I just write 16 as a power? Yes. Okay, what times itself is 49? 7 times 7 is 49. Therefore, writing 49 as a power would be 7 squared. Okay, how about this one? 11 squared. Now we're going to go back to 6th and 7th grade. Y'all remember this chart? There's only one new thing. Now, if you had Miss Butler last year, I believe she already taught you this. If you didn't, I don't know. Okay? So, in 8th grade, all numbers in our class are what? They're all real. Now, when you get to super advanced math way up there, there's going to be non-real numbers, imaginary numbers. We are not there. Okay? All numbers in my class are, they are either rational or, but they can never be both. Do you see how their circles don't mix? Now, rational numbers are, and irrational numbers are also, but they don't mix. Does this make sense? It's like saying if this was titled animals and dogs were over here and cats were over here, dogs and cats can never be a dog and a cat. Like they can't be each other, but they're both animals. So they fall under that big category. Yes? Okay. What is an irrational number? Are y'all ready? An irrational number are your square roots that are not perfect. So they're all square roots that aren't perfect. Your perfect square roots are your square roots that give you integers. So like the square root of 4 is 2. Yes, the square root of 9 is 3. The square root of 16 is, those are perfect. Those are whole numbers. So obviously they're not irrational. These were all irrational, where we had to approximate them. Yes? And I'll explain that in a second. So let's do that right now. Get your calculator. Put in the square root of 36. That is not irrational because the square root of 36 is 6 is a whole number. Do y'all agree? Now put in the square root of 37. That is what? That is what though? It's irrational because it's not perfect. So all square roots that are not perfect are what? So all you got to do is put them in and see if it gives you an integer, and if it does, it goes over to the left. Okay? The other thing that's irrational is pi. Y'all remember pi from 7th grade? 3.1415, and it keeps going on forever. So what makes these numbers irrational? Irrational numbers are numbers that cannot be made into a fraction. So if you look at my calculator, if I put in like 0.25 and I go to math, fraction, enter, it's obviously going to turn it into a fraction, yes? But if you put in the square root of 37, hit enter, and then hit math, tell it to turn it to a fraction, it can't do it. Because it actually keeps going forever and ever and ever, just like pi. So if I put in pi, is that the whole pi? No. Or did the calculator stop it? You see what I'm saying? If I hit math, fraction, enter, the calculator cannot turn pi into a fraction because it's irrational. Now in 7th grade, you learn that 22/7 is really, really close to pi. Y'all remember that? But it's not exact. Just like you would use 3.14 sometimes. It's not exact. Irrational numbers are numbers that cannot be turned into fractions. Are y'all with me? What are those numbers? Square roots that aren't? And pi. All other numbers go over here in these circles. So what are rational numbers? They're numbers that can be turned into fractions. So these are your fractions and your terminating and repeating decimals. So terminating and repeating decimals. So rational numbers are your fractions, your terminating decimals, your repeating decimals, and your integers and whole numbers, because they all fall within rational. Can a whole number be turned into a fraction? Yeah, by placing it over what? 1. So is a whole number rational? Yes. And notice that it is a subcategory of rational because whole numbers are rational. Okay? All right, what are integers? Not just negatives. Negatives and positive counting numbers. So these are positive and negative counting numbers, like -1, -2, -3, -4. Integers will never have decimals in them. So if it has a decimal, it's just rational. Okay, whole numbers are what? They're the positive integers. They are integers, but only the positive ones. So whole numbers are only your positive counting numbers, and whole numbers does not include 0. Excuse me, whole numbers includes 0, where counting does not include 0. And that's easy to remember because when you count, do you start with 0 or 1? 1. Yeah, so counting doesn't include 0, whole numbers do. And that's the real number chart. To me, it's super, super easy, okay? If a number is whole, then it's 4 categories. It's whole, it's integer, it's rational, it's real. Yes? Because there's how many answers would integers have? 3. It's an integer, it's rational, it's... How many answers would rational have? Just 2. It's rational and it's... How many answers would irrational have? It's irrational and it's... So what you're going to do with these numbers is you're going to check what it belongs to. Now, listen to me. If you check rational, you better not check what? Irrational. They cannot be rational and irrational at the same time. What are every single one going to have checked? They're all real. So let's do it together. The square root of 100. The first thing I do is ask myself, is it irrational? Meaning it's not perfect. Well, what is the square root of 100? 10. Write that down. We're not actually looking at the square root of 100. We're looking at 10. Where would 10 most specifically fall on this chart? It's a whole number. It's also counting, but did y'all see that's not here? So don't worry about counting. It's whole. So I'm going to check whole. Now, what else does whole belong to? Integer. What else? Rational. What else? So if it's whole, it's going to have 4 check marks. Good? All right, the square root of 24. Let's go put it in our calculator. Is it perfect? No, so it is automatically irrational. If it's irrational, it's also real. All right, the negative square root of 80. Well, real quick, we're going to have to order these in a minute. See, it says graph and order the numbers from this list. So what was the square root of 24? 4.8. So 4.90 if I round it. Yeah? Okay. The negative square root of 81. Let's go see. Negative square root of 81. Ooh, was that perfect? Yes. This is actually negative 9. So since it's perfect, it's not over here. Yes? What kind of number is negative 9? It's an integer, so check that off. If it's an integer, it's also and good. Why is it not whole? Because it's a negative, and wholes are only positive. All right, look at this next one. Negative 4/3. Negative 4/3, please do not tell me that's an integer. Because every year I got students say, well, it has a negative sign, so it's an integer. No. What are integers? Positive and negative counting. You would never count negative 4/3. And that does not simplify to a counting number. Now, if it simplifies, then it's a counting number. Like if it's simplified to negative 2. But that does not simplify. This is just a fraction. Do y'all agree? So where would a fraction fall on here? Rational. And if it's rational, it's also? All right. Now it says, graph and order these numbers from least to greatest. Well, let's go change negative 4/3 to a decimal to see what it is. Do y'all remember how to change them to decimals? Math, decimal, enter. So it's worth about, I owe $1.33. I like to make it look like money. So it wants them from least to greatest. What's always worth the least? The negatives, okay? And negatives are like owing money, yes? And the more money I owe, the less money I have. So which one of these negatives would I owe more money? So it's worth the least. And I'm going to write it in its original form. So I'm going to write it as negative square root of 81. Now, if you don't understand it as money, then just put it on a number line. The number furthest to the left is worth the least amount. Are y'all with me? Y'all been doing this since 6th grade. All right, what's the next least? The other negative, so negative 4/3. And then out of the positives, which one's the least? $4.90 or 10 cents? $10. I'm so sorry I messed you up. $10. $4.90. So the square root of 24. And then 10, which is the square root of 100. Easy. The last part says evaluate. What does evaluate mean? Solve. So you're just going to type these in your calculator. The biggest thing people mess up on is they forget to arrow out of the square root. So I'll talk to you about that. So let's go do this one. So I'm going to do 11 minus the square root of 81. And you just need to arrow out of that square root. And then hit enter, and that's your answer. So 2. 12 plus the square root of 6, isn't that, excuse me, the square root of 36, isn't that just 6? And 12 plus 6 is 18. Okay, put this one in your calculator, the square root of 225. But what do I have to do before I hit minus 1? I mean, you could. I got to arrow out. If you change, you're going to get the same answer. Plus negative 1 or minus 1. It doesn't matter. What did I get? 14. Now look what happens if I didn't arrow out. Do y'all see what it did? It continues your square root, and it's going to give you a totally different answer. So you cannot do it like that, okay? All right, this one wants you to evaluate when x is 36. So you're doing exactly what we did yesterday. So you're going to do negative 7 times the square root of 36. So it's just negative 7 times 6, which is what? Negative 42. All right, for this one, you're doing the square root of x, which what is x? So I have the square root of 36 over 6 plus 9. Now, if you know the square root of 36, it's just 6 divided by 6, which is, but let's pretend you didn't know that. How would I put this in my calculator? If it's a fraction, I use what? Alpha y equals. So I go to alpha y equals option 1. And on top, you would just put in the square root button with the 36 over 6. And then arrow out plus 9, and it will give you that answer. Because, I mean, sometimes those square roots are not perfect, and you're going to need the calculator for it. Okay? All right, try this one on your own. Take one, pass it down, put your name on it right when you get it. Okay, on 1 through 3, I did notes exactly like this. So you need to do it correctly. It says write the number as a power. That's on the front of your notes, yes? Okay, on 4 through 9, it says evaluate. Remember, if it doesn't specify, you can write the positive answer. But if it does specify, then you have to write what it's asking for, okay? On 10 through 19, what does it want you to do? Approximate the square root. These are all not perfect. They're all irrational. They're decimals. But it wants you to round to the nearest. If you don't do that, it's wrong. Did everybody hear me? Okay. On 22 through 23, it wants you to order from least to greatest. Now, listen carefully. You need to write your answers in their original form. So, yes, of course, change them to decimals. So, the square root of 64 is 8. Negative 5 is negative 5. The square root of 9 is 3. 2 is 2. But when you write your answer, you're not going to write 8. You're going to write what? Please make it easy for the person who's grading your paper. You need to write them in their original form. Everybody good? All right, 24 through 26 are word problems. 24 and 25, I literally did for you on the notes. I mean, it's the exact same thing as that one on the front, okay? Then 26 gives you an equation, and all you have to do is plug in what they give you for L. So don't freak out about the word problems. They're easy. They are, I'm telling you, okay? Flip to the back. This is just like the notes. Use your notes paper with the chart on it to check mark. Okay? If it's a whole number and you only check whole, then you're missing 3 things. Whole numbers have how many check marks?
4.
Does that make sense? Just like your notes. So please use your notes and fill this out correctly. Then at the bottom, you're just evaluating for when the value of x is that number. It's super easy. Get busy. You should finish.